Two riders approached each other across an empty Missouri field. One carried a white flag, the other carried 47 scalps braided into his saddle. It was September 1864. The sun hung low over the prairie, casting long shadows across the grass. Dust swirled in the warm autumn wind. Two horses walked slowly toward each other, step by step, closer and closer, until they stopped, barely 10 feet apart. The man with the white flag was a Union commander. His name was Captain James Whitmore. He wore a pristine blue uniform, brass buttons gleaming in the fading light. His hands were clean. His conscience, he believed, was clean too. The man facing him was William Anderson, Bloody Bill, the most feared name in Missouri, the most wanted man in the entire Union Army. They sat there in silence for a long moment. The wind caught the white flag and made it flutter. Somewhere in the distance, a crow called out, and Captain Whitmore began to speak. He spoke of peace. He spoke of amnesty. He spoke of a new life far from Missouri, far from the blood and the killing and the endless cycle of revenge. Bill Anderson listened. He listened for exactly 22 minutes, and then he asked one question. The answer to that question would determine whether Captain Whitmore lived or died. But here is what makes this story different from every other story about Bloody Bill Anderson. The captain answered wrong. Only one rider left that field as the sun set over Missouri. The white flag lay trampled in the dirt, and Bill Anderson rode back to his camp with blood on his hands and something new in his saddlebag. But to understand why this meeting happened, why Captain Whitmore thought he could reason with the most dangerous man in America, and what question Bill Anderson asked that sealed the captain's fate, we need to go back to the rules of war, back to the white flag and what it was supposed to mean, and back to why by September 1864 those rules meant absolutely nothing in Missouri. The white flag has been a symbol of truce for thousands of years. Romans used it. Medieval knights used it. And when the Civil War began in 1861, both Union and Confederate forces agreed. The white flag meant stop fighting. It meant we want to talk. It meant no one dies while the flag flies. That was the theory. The reality in Missouri was something else entirely. By 1863, the war in Missouri had become something that neither side could control. It was not a war of armies and generals and battlefield formations. It was a war of neighbors killing neighbors, farms burning, families destroyed, women and children caught in the crossfire of a conflict that had no front lines and no safe zones. The Union called Bill Anderson and his men bushwhackers, terrorists, criminals who deserved no protection under the laws of war, and the Union acted accordingly. They did not take bushwhacker prisoners. They did not offer amnesty to guerrilla fighters. They did not follow the rules of civilized warfare when dealing with men like Bill Anderson. But here is the thing about rules. When one side stops following them, the other side notices. Bill Anderson noticed. He noticed when Union troops burned farms without warning. He noticed when jayhawkers from Kansas crossed the border and killed civilians. He noticed when women were arrested, when families were imprisoned, when his own mother was beaten and his sisters were locked in a building that would become their tomb. And after Josephine died, after his 14-year-old sister was crushed under the rubble of a building the Union knew was unsafe, Bill Anderson stopped caring about rules entirely. The white flag meant nothing to him anymore. It had meant nothing to the Union when they killed his family. Why should it mean anything to him now? This is the context that Captain James Whitmore did not understand. This is the history he had not lived through. He came from the East, from a world where war still had rules, where officers were gentlemen, where surrender was possible and peace could be negotiated. He did not understand Missouri. He did not understand Bloody Bill. And that misunderstanding would cost him his life. Captain Whitmore arrived in Missouri in August 1864. He was 32 years old, a career officer with a reputation for diplomatic skill. His superiors believed he could do what soldiers could not, convince the guerrillas to lay down their arms, end the bloodshed through negotiation rather than force. It was a reasonable idea. It was completely wrong. Whitmore spent his first weeks gathering intelligence. He spoke to farmers who had survived bushwhacker raids. He interviewed Union soldiers who had faced Anderson in battle. He read reports, studied maps, analyzed patrol routes, and he came to a conclusion that would seal his fate. He believed Bill Anderson was rational. The report showed a man who planned carefully, who chose his targets with precision, who knew when to fight and when to retreat. The Centralia massacre, as brutal as it was, showed tactical brilliance. Anderson had lured Major Johnston into a trap. He had positioned his men perfectly. He had won decisively against superior numbers. This was not the behavior of a madman. This was the behavior of a soldier. And soldiers, Whitmore believed, could be negotiated with. He was half right. Bill Anderson was indeed rational. Every scalp on his saddle had been taken deliberately. Every killing had been calculated. Every action served a purpose. But Whitmore misunderstood what that purpose was. He thought Anderson fought for the Confederacy. He thought Anderson wanted Southern independence or states' rights, or whatever political cause the guerrillas claimed to support. He did not understand that Bill Anderson fought for one reason only: revenge. And revenge is not something you can negotiate away. The request for a meeting came through unofficial channels. A farmer who had connections to both sides. A message passed from hand to hand until it reached Anderson camp in late September. A Union officer wanted to talk under a white flag. Just the two of them. No soldiers, no ambush. A simple conversation about ending the war in Missouri. Bill Anderson men advised against it. They had seen too many truces violated. They had lost too many friends to Union treachery. They trusted the white flag about as much as they trusted a rattlesnake coiled at their feet. But Bill said yes. His men could not understand why. One of them, a young fighter named Cole Younger, asked Bill directly, "Why meet with this Union dog? Why give him the chance to set a trap?" Bill's answer was strange. He said he wanted to ask the captain a question. Cole pressed further. What question? What could possibly be worth the risk? Bill did not answer. He simply checked his revolvers, mounted his horse, and rode out toward the meeting point. Cole Younger would later recall that moment in his memoirs. He wrote that something was different about Bill that day. His eyes were colder than usual. His jaw was set in a way that suggested he had already made a decision he was not sharing with his men. Cole had a bad feeling. He should have trusted that feeling. The meeting was set for a flat stretch of prairie 5 miles from the nearest town. Open ground, no trees for ambushers to hide behind, no buildings where troops could wait in reserve. Just grass and sky and 2 men on horseback. Captain Whitmore arrived first. He had followed the instructions exactly. No soldiers, no weapons except the pistol at his hip, which the rules of the meeting allowed. Just himself, his horse, and a white flag tied to a wooden pole. He waited. The sun was still high when he spotted movement on the horizon. A single rider, approaching slowly. The horse was black. The rider wore a grey shirt stained with something Whitmore did not want to identify. And even from a distance, Whitmore could see the strange decorations hanging from the saddle. Human hair, braided into the leather. Whitmore had read the reports. He knew about the scalps. He had told himself he was prepared. He was not prepared. As Anderson drew closer, the full horror of his appearance became clear. The scalps were not just hanging from the saddle, they were woven into it. Some were old and dried, others looked fresher. The reins had hair braided into them too. Different colors, different textures. Each one had belonged to a living person. Whitmore felt his stomach turn, but he held his ground. He had a mission. He was here to negotiate. He would not let fear undermine his purpose. Bill Anderson stopped 10 feet away. He did not speak. He simply looked at Captain Whitmore with eyes that held nothing. No anger, no hatred, no emotion at all. Just a flat, empty gaze that seemed to see right through the Union officer. The silence stretched. Finally, Whitmore spoke. His voice was steady, professional. He introduced himself. He explained his authority. He outlined the terms he was prepared to offer. Amnesty, safe passage out of Missouri, a chance to start over, far from the war, far from the killing. All Anderson had to do was lay down his arms. All he had to do was stop fighting. Bill listened. His expression never changed. When Whitmore finished speaking, the silence returned. The wind blew across the prairie. The white flag fluttered. Whitmore waited for a response, and Bill Anderson laughed. was not a normal laugh. There was no humor in it, no joy. It was the sound of something broken, something that had stopped being fully human somewhere in the wreckage of Kansas City. Whitmore felt the first real spike of fear, but he pressed on. He repeated his offer. He emphasized the generosity of the terms. He pointed out that Anderson could not win, that the war was turning against the South, that continued fighting would only lead to more death. Bill stopped laughing. He leaned forward in his saddle, and he asked his question. The question that would determine whether James Whitmore lived or died. "Do you know who signed Order Number 11? Whitmore blinked. Order Number 11. The forced evacuation of 4 Missouri counties. The order that had displaced thousands of civilians. The order that had led to the arrest of women suspected of aiding bushwhackers. The order that had put Bill Anderson's sisters in that building in Kansas City." Whitmore knew about the order. Every Union officer in Missouri knew about it. It was controversial, even within the Army. Some called it a necessary measure. Others called it a war crime. But that was not what Bill was asking. He was asking about signatures. He was asking about names. Whitmore hesitated. He did not know the specific signatories. He had not been involved in that decision. He was not even in Missouri when the order was issued. He started to explain this. He started to distance himself from the order, to establish his own innocence. But Bill was not listening anymore. He had reached into his saddlebag. He pulled out a piece of paper, yellowed, creased from being folded and unfolded many times. Official Union letterhead at the top. He handed it to Whitmore. "Look at the bottom." Whitmore took the paper with trembling hands. He looked at the signatures, and his blood ran cold, because the third name on the list was his brother, Major Thomas Whitmore, one of the officers who had endorsed Order Number 11, one of the men responsible for the policy that had killed Josephine Anderson. James Whitmore looked up from the paper. Bill Anderson's hand was already on his revolver. "No, wait, I did not sign this. I had nothing to do with..." Bill drew. The gunshot echoed across the empty prairie. Captain James Whitmore fell from his horse. The white flag tumbled from its pole and landed in the dirt beside him. His blood began to soak into the Missouri soil, the same soil that had drunk the blood of so many others. Bill Anderson dismounted. He walked slowly to where the captain lay. Whitmore was not dead yet. The bullet had taken him in the chest, but he was still breathing, still looking up at the man who had shot him. And Bill Anderson knelt beside him. He spoke quietly, almost gently. "Your brother signed the paper that killed my sister. She was 14 years old. She screamed for 6 minutes while the building crushed her. Nobody came. Nobody helped. Nobody cared." Whitmore tried to speak, tried to explain, tried to beg. Bill continued. "You came here to offer me peace. You came here to ask me to stop killing. But tell me, Captain, did your brother offer peace to Josephine? Did he ask the building to stop falling? Did he care that she was just a child?" The captain had no answer. There was no answer. Bill drew his knife. What he did next would not be recorded in any official report. The Union would list Captain Whitmore as missing in action, presumed dead. They would not describe the condition of his body when it was finally found 3 weeks later. But the guerrillas who saw Bill return to camp that evening, they knew. They knew from the fresh blood on his clothes, from the new addition to his saddlebag, from the look in his eyes that was somehow colder and emptier than before. Cole Younger asked what happened. Bill said one word: "Justice." Then he went to his tent and did not emerge until morning. The aftermath of Captain Whitmore's death sent shockwaves through the Union command in Missouri. An officer had been killed under a flag of truce. The rules of civilized warfare had been violated in the most blatant way possible. But here is the terrible irony. The Union could not publicly condemn Anderson for violating the white flag, because doing so would require them to acknowledge their own violations, their own broken truces, their own murdered prisoners, their own brutality against civilians. The war in Missouri had moved beyond rules. Both sides knew it. Neither side would admit it. The official report listed Captain Whitmore as killed in action against guerrilla forces. There was no mention of the white flag, no mention of the peace negotiation, no mention of the question Bill Anderson had asked. His widow received a letter expressing condolences. His children were told their father died a hero fighting for the Union cause. His grave would eventually be marked with honors. But the men who had seen Bill ride back alone, they knew the truth. And the truth spread through whispers and rumors and campfire stories until every soldier in Missouri knew. You did not negotiate with bloody Bill Anderson. You did not approach him under a white flag. You did not try to make peace with a man who had declared war on peace itself. 3 more Union officers would ignore this warning in the months that followed. None of them came back either. But that is not the end of this story, because there is something else that happened at that meeting. Something that Captain Whitmore never knew. Something that Bill Anderson kept secret until the day he died. The paper with the signatures. It was fake. Major Thomas Whitmore had never signed Order Number 11. He had never even been in Missouri during that period. He was a supply officer stationed in Illinois, a bureaucrat who pushed papers and never heard a shot fired in anger. Bill Anderson had the names of the actual signatories. He had memorized them. He knew exactly who was responsible for his sister's death. Captain James Whitmore brother was not on that list. So why did Bill kill him? The answer reveals something darker than simple revenge, something more disturbing than anger or hatred or the desire for justice. Bill Anderson had stopped caring about guilt. He had stopped distinguishing between those who hurt him and those who simply wore the same uniform. He had moved beyond revenge into something else, something that had no name, something that consumed everyone it touched. Captain Whitmore was not killed for his brother's sins. He was killed because he was Union. He was killed because he represented the same army, the same government, the same system that had crushed Josephine under tons of brick and mortar. He was killed because Bill Anderson had decided that every Union man was guilty. Every one of them. No exceptions, no innocence, no mercy. This is what happened when the rules of war broke down completely. This is what happened when both sides abandoned the pretense of civilization. This is what happened when a 14-year-old girl died screaming and nobody came to help. The white flag stopped meaning peace. It just meant an easier target. In the weeks after Whitmore's death, Bill Anderson became even more aggressive. He attacked Union patrols with renewed fury. He showed no quarter to prisoners. He made no distinction between combatants and civilians who supported the Union cause. His men followed his lead. Jesse James, barely 18 years old, learned from watching Bill. He learned that mercy was weakness. He learned that rules were for fools. He learned that the world would take everything from you if you let it. These lessons would shape his entire future. But that future was still years away. In October 1864, the only future that mattered was surviving the next day. And Bill Anderson days were running out. The Union had learned their lesson about white flags. They would not try to negotiate again. They would not send more officers to talk peace with a man who used truce flags as death warrants. Instead, they sent soldiers, hundreds of them. Their orders were simple. Find William Anderson and kill him. No capture, no trial, no pretense of legal process, just bullets and blood and an end to the terror that had gripped Missouri for so long. Bill knew they were coming. He did not care. He had stopped caring about survival somewhere between the white flag meeting and the fresh scalp in his saddlebag. Death held no fear for a man who had already lost everything worth living for. His sister was dead. His mother had been tortured. His family home had been burned. What did he have left to lose? Only his life. And his life, he had decided, was worth less than his revenge. The Union patrol found him 3 weeks later. 150 soldiers against 30 guerrillas. Overwhelming odds. A fight that should have ended in seconds with Anderson and his men dead or captured. Instead, Bill Anderson charged. He rode straight into 150 Union guns with only 30 men behind him, screaming his sister name as bullets tore through the air around him. And somehow, impossibly, he made it through. He made it through because the Union soldiers had never seen anything like it. They had never faced a man who charged into certain death without hesitation. Their shots went wide, their formation broke, their courage failed. Bill Anderson cut through them like a scythe through wheat, but even he could not outrun fate forever. 2 bullets found his head, 2 more found his chest. He fell from his horse in a Missouri field, not far from where he had killed Captain Whitmore under a flag of truce. The war in Missouri did not end with his death. The killing continued for months, The guerrillas scattered and reformed and kept fighting. Jesse James would carry on the legacy for another 15 years. But something changed when Bill Anderson died. The Union did not just kill him. They desecrated his body. They displayed his corpse for 3 days in a public square. They let women come and stab it with knives. They let men spit on his face. They wanted to prove that he was mortal, that he could be killed, that the monster of Missouri was just a man after all. But the crowds who came to see his body, they did not see a monster. They saw a 24-year-old man, a man with no gray in his hair, a man with no wrinkles on his face, a man who looked far too young to have done the things the reports said he had done. Some of the women who stabbed his corpse had lost husbands to his raids. Some of the men who spat on him had lost brothers at Centralia. Their anger was real, and their desire for revenge was understandable. But others in the crowd felt something different. They felt the tragedy of it all. The tragedy of a man who might have been something else. If his family had not been destroyed, if his sister had not died screaming, if the rules of war had been followed by both sides, the white flag that Captain Whitmore carried had meant peace. But by the time it reached that Missouri field, peace was no longer possible. Not for Captain Whitmore, not for Bill Anderson, not for anyone caught in the endless cycle of revenge that had consumed the border between Kansas and Missouri. The flag still flutters in our imagination, a symbol of what might have been, a reminder of how easily civilization can collapse when both sides abandon the rules that hold it together. Bill Anderson met a Union commander under a white flag to talk peace. Only one of them rode back, and the white flag lay trampled in the blood-soaked Missouri dirt, meaning nothing, protecting no one. Just a piece of cloth in a war that had moved beyond symbols and treaties, and the fragile agreements that keep humans from destroying each other. This is not a story about heroes and villains. This is a story about what happens when the rules break down. This is a story about what happens when a 14-year-old girl dies screaming and nobody comes to help. This is a story about the white flag, and how easily it can become just another weapon in a war without end. But there is more to this story that history has tried to forget. Because Captain Whitmore was not the first Union officer to try negotiating with guerrillas in Missouri. He was not even the 10th. The Union had been attempting diplomatic solutions since 1862, when it became clear that military force alone could not pacify the state. And every single attempt had failed. Some officers were ambushed before they could deliver their messages. Others made it to meetings only to find the guerrillas had set traps. A few actually succeeded in making contact and returning alive. But the deals they negotiated never lasted more than a few weeks before someone broke the peace. The question that historians still debate is, why did the Union keep trying? The answer reveals something uncomfortable about how wars are fought and how commanders think. General Thomas Ewing, the man who actually signed Order No. 11, believed that guerrilla warfare could be ended through a combination of force and incentive. Crush the fighters while offering amnesty to those who surrendered. It was a strategy that had worked in other conflicts. It seemed reasonable on paper, but Ewing did not understand Missouri. He did not understand that the war here was personal in a way that wars rarely are. Every burned farm had an owner who remembered. Every dead soldier had a brother who wanted revenge. Every woman who lost a child to hunger or violence carried that wound for the rest of her life. You cannot offer amnesty to people who do not want forgiveness. You cannot negotiate peace with people who want justice. And Bill Anderson wanted neither. He wanted blood. Captain Whitmore walked into that meeting believing he could reason with a soldier. He was facing something else entirely. He was facing a force of nature, a storm in human form, a man who had passed beyond anger into something cold and absolute. The white flag was worthless against that. But here is what makes this story even more tragic. Whitmore almost did not go. 3 days before the meeting, he received a letter from his wife. She was pregnant with their second child. She begged him to request a transfer, to leave Missouri, to find a posting where the war was fought between armies instead of between neighbors. He almost listened. He wrote a letter requesting reassignment. He addressed it to his commanding officer. He sealed it and prepared to send it. Then he heard about a new guerrilla attack. 12 Union soldiers killed, a supply wagon burned, farms destroyed. He tore up the letter. He decided he could not leave while the killing continued. He decided he had to try one more time to find a peaceful solution. He decided that talking to Bill Anderson was worth the risk. His wife never knew about the letter he almost sent. She only knew that he rode out one September morning and never came back. The search for Captain Whitmore lasted 2 weeks. Union patrols scoured the countryside, interrogating farmers, checking abandoned buildings, following any rumor that might lead to their missing officer. They found nothing. Bill Anderson had been thorough. The body would not be discovered for another week, and only by accident. A farmer plowing a new field noticed something strange in the soil. He dug carefully, not knowing what he might find. What he found made him vomit. The Union report described the remains as badly mutilated and in an advanced state of decomposition. It did not describe the specific mutilations. It did not mention the missing scalp. It did not record that Captain Whitmore brass buttons had been cut from his uniform, or where those buttons would later be found. Bill Anderson wore them on his own coat. A trophy, a message, a declaration that negotiation meant nothing to him, that peace was impossible, that the only terms he would accept were the complete destruction of the Union Army in Missouri. The Union received that message. They stopped sending negotiators. Instead, they increased their patrols. They burned more farms suspected of harboring guerrillas. They arrested more women. They executed more prisoners. The cycle of violence accelerated, and Bill Anderson, watching from the hills, was satisfied. This was what he wanted. Not peace, not victory, just an endless war that would consume everything and everyone until there was nothing left but ashes and memory. His men did not understand this at first. Some of them still believed they were fighting for the Confederacy. Some believed they were defending their homes and families. Some believed they would eventually win and return to normal lives. Bill Anderson knew better. There would be no normal life after what they had done. There would be no homecoming for men who had scalped and mutilated and murdered their way across Missouri. The war would end eventually, but for men like them, the killing would never stop. Either they would keep killing Union soldiers, or Union soldiers would kill them. There was no third option. Jesse James came to understand this during the White Flag incident. He was not present at the meeting itself. Bill had gone alone. But he was there when Bill returned. He saw the blood. He saw the new trophy. He heard Bill say that single word, justice. And something changed in Jesse that night. He had been a guerrilla for months by then. He had killed Union soldiers. He had participated in raids. But some part of him still believed the war would end and he would go home. After the White Flag, he stopped believing. He realized that home no longer existed, not for him, not for any of them. The things they had done could not be undone. The blood on their hands could not be washed away. They were outlaws now, and outlaws do not negotiate peace. Outlaws die fighting or they die running. Those are the only options. Jesse James chose fighting. He would continue fighting for the next 15 years, long after the Civil War ended, long after Bill Anderson was dead and buried. He became the most famous outlaw in American history, robbing banks and trains and stagecoaches across the country. But he never forgot the lessons he learned in Missouri. He never forgot Bill Anderson. He never forgot the White Flag that meant nothing. The other guerrillas who witnessed that September evening each carried their own lessons forward. Cole Younger became an outlaw himself. Frank James followed his brother into crime. A dozen others scattered across the West, bringing their particular skills to cattle rustling and bank robbery, and the various illegal enterprises that flourished in the lawless territories. They had learned that rules were for fools. They had learned that mercy was weakness. They had learned that the only law that mattered was the law of the gun, and they had learned these lessons because the Union Army taught them. This is the uncomfortable truth that many histories of the Civil War avoid discussing. Yes, the bushwhackers committed atrocities. Yes, Bill Anderson was a monster by any reasonable definition. Yes, the Centralia massacre and the scalping and the mutilations were horrific beyond description. But the monster did not create himself. The monster was made. He was made by Order Number 11. He was made by the building collapse in Kansas City. He was made by his sister screaming for 6 minutes while the rubble crushed her. He was made by a war that had abandoned every rule of civilized conflict. When Captain Whitmore rode out under a white flag, he believed he was dealing with a Confederate guerrilla. Someone who fought for a cause, however misguided. Someone who could be reasoned with, bargained with, perhaps even converted. He was dealing with something else. He was dealing with the consequence of what happens when you kill a man's sister and face no justice. The consequence of what happens when you torture a man mother and suffer no punishment. The consequence of what happens when you burn a man home and expect him to simply accept it. Bill Anderson was the consequence. And consequences do not negotiate. The news of Whitmore's death spread through the Union ranks like poison. Officers who had considered similar diplomatic missions quietly abandoned their plans. Soldiers who had hoped the war might end through negotiation realized that hope was foolish. There would be no peace in Missouri, not while Bill Anderson lived. And so the hunt intensified, more patrols, more soldiers, more resources devoted to finding and killing one 24-year-old man who had become the symbol of everything the Union feared. Bill Anderson knew he was being hunted. He did not hide. If anything, he became more visible. He attacked more frequently. He took more risks. He seemed almost eager to draw the Union forces toward him. His men thought he was being reckless. They did not understand. Bill Anderson was not reckless. He was ready to die. He had been ready since the day Josephine died. Everything since then. The killing, the scalping, the white flag meeting. It was all just filling time, waiting for the bullet that would finally end the pain. But he would not die quietly. He would not die begging for mercy like the Union soldiers he had executed. He would die fighting. He would die charging into impossible odds with his sister name on his lips. And he would take as many Union soldiers with him as he possibly could. October 1864. The leaves were changing. The war was changing too. Sherman was marching through Georgia. The Confederacy was crumbling. Even the most optimistic Southern supporters were beginning to accept that the cause was lost. But in Missouri, none of that mattered. The bushwhackers kept fighting. Bill Anderson kept killing. The white flag kept meaning nothing. On October 26th, a Union patrol spotted Anderson and his men near the town of Albany, Missouri. The patrol commander counted approximately 30 guerrillas. He had 150 soldiers under his command. The math seemed simple. The math was wrong. Bill Anderson saw the Union troops and made an instant decision. He did not retreat. He did not look for a defensive position. He did not try to escape. He charged. 30 men against 150. His men followed without hesitation. They had learned not to question Bill's orders. They had seen what happened to the one guerrilla who had refused to participate in the white flag meeting. The one who had said it was dishonorable to kill under a flag of truce. Bill had made him dig his own grave. Then he had shot him and left him in it. After that, no one questioned Bill Anderson's orders. The charge was suicidal and brilliant. The Union soldiers were formed in a defensive line, expecting the guerrillas to probe their position and retreat. They were not expecting a frontal assault. Their rifles were loaded, but not aimed. Their commander was still giving orders when the first guerrillas crashed into their formation. Chaos. The Union line broke in the first 30 seconds. Soldiers who had been standing in neat rows were suddenly fighting for their lives against screaming horsemen with revolvers in each hand. The guerrillas were firing constantly, each man carrying 4 or 6 or 8 loaded pistols, shooting and discarding, and drawing new weapons without ever slowing their horses. Bill Anderson was at the center of the charge. He was screaming something. Josephine, over and over, Josephine. The Union soldiers who survived would remember that scream. They would hear it in their nightmares. They would tell their children and grandchildren about the man who charged 150 soldiers while screaming a woman name. Bill killed at least 10 men in that charge, maybe more. The count was never certain because the fighting was too confused and the bodies were mixed together by the end. But his luck, his terrible, impossible luck, finally ran out. A rifle bullet caught him in the back of the head. He kept riding. Another bullet hit his chest. He kept riding. 2 more bullets found him before he finally fell from his horse and lay still in the Missouri dirt. The fighting continued around his body for another 20 minutes. His men saw him fall but could not reach him. The Union soldiers were regrouping, pouring fire into the guerrilla formation, finally gaining the upper hand through sheer numbers. The guerrillas retreated. They left Bill's body behind, It was the only time in the entire war that they abandoned one of their own, but there was no choice. The Union fire was too heavy. To try to recover Bill's body would mean more deaths, and Bill would have understood. He had never cared about his body. He had stopped caring about anything except revenge. And now the revenge was over. The Union soldiers who reached Bill's body did not treat it with respect. They stripped it. They searched it. They found the brass buttons from Captain Whitmore's uniform in his pocket. They found the paper with the signatures, the fake paper, the paper that had condemned an innocent man to death. The Union commander read it carefully. He recognized the names on it. He knew that Major Thomas Whitmore had never signed Order Number 11. He knew that Captain James Whitmore had died for something his brother never did. He did not share this information with anyone. He simply burned the paper and ordered his men to prepare the body for transport. Bill Anderson would be displayed in the town square for 3 days. Citizens would come to see the monster. Women would stab his corpse. Men would spit on his face. And somewhere in Illinois, Major Thomas Whitmore would read the news of his brother's death and never understand why James had been targeted. He would live another 40 years, tormented by the question. He would never know about the fake paper. He would never know that his brother died because Bill Anderson had stopped caring about truth. He would never know that guilt and innocence had become meaningless in the blood-soaked fields of Missouri. The white flag, such a simple symbol, a piece of white cloth tied to a pole. In every other war, it meant something. It meant stop. It meant talk. It meant we are not enemies right now. In Missouri in 1864, it meant nothing. Captain James Whitmore learned that lesson in the last moments of his life. Bill Anderson had already learned it when his sister died, and the hundreds of men who died between them. Union and Confederate, soldier and civilian, guilty and innocent. They all learned it too. The rules of war are only rules if both sides follow them. When one side breaks them, the other side notices. And when both sides break them, there are no rules. There is only violence, only revenge, only blood and fire, and the endless cycle of killing that consumes everything it touches. You have just witnessed one of the darkest chapters in American history. A story of broken truces and murdered officers and men who became monsters. Stories like this, the ones they do not teach in school. Take time to research and tell properly. When you click Super Thanks, you are not just supporting a channel. You are saying this history matters. You are helping uncover more stories that deserve to be remembered. Every contribution helps us continue this work. The white flag meeting between Bill Anderson and Captain Whitmore lasted less than an hour, but its consequences lasted generations. The guerrillas who fought under Bill would carry his lessons into the post-war era. They would become the most notorious outlaws in American history. They would rob and kill and terrorize until finally, one by one, they were hunted down and destroyed. Jesse James died in 1882, shot in the back by a member of his own gang. Cole Younger spent 25 years in prison. Frank James surrendered and lived a quiet life, haunted by memories he never discussed. They all remembered Bill Anderson. They all remembered the white flag. The Union soldiers who survived that September meeting carried their own burdens. Some could not shake the image of Bill Anderson's face, the emptiness in his eyes, the scalps braided into his saddle. They saw it in their dreams. They saw it when they closed their eyes. They saw it every time someone mentioned Missouri. Some of them went mad. Others simply stopped talking about the war entirely. One survivor, a private named Thomas Richardson, wrote a letter to his wife the night after he saw Bill return from the white flag meeting. The letter was not mailed. It was found among his belongings after he died in 1901. "I saw hell today," he wrote. "Not the hell they preach about in church, the real one. The one that walks on 2 legs and rides a horse and wears 40 scalps like medals. I saw what happens when men stop being men. I saw what happens when the rules disappear. God help me, I cannot unsee it." The letter goes on for several more pages, but the handwriting becomes increasingly erratic. By the end, it is nearly illegible. Thomas Richardson did not mail the letter because he could not finish it. The memories overwhelmed him. He lived another 37 years with those memories. He never spoke about Missouri to anyone. His grandchildren found the letter when they were cleaning out his house after his death. They could not understand what it meant. The war had been over for decades. Missouri was peaceful. The bushwhackers were long dead, but the letter remained. Evidence of something that happened on a September afternoon when two men met under a white flag and only one rode away. History books would eventually record the meeting as a footnote, a paragraph or two about a failed peace negotiation, a minor incident in a minor theater of a war that was decided elsewhere. But the men who were there knew better. They knew that nothing about Missouri was minor. They knew that the white flag meeting revealed something fundamental about human nature, about what happens when civilization collapses, about the thin line between soldier and savage. Bill Anderson crossed that line. Captain Whitmore thought he could pull him back. He was wrong. And the white flag that should have protected him became his death warrant. The site of the meeting is still there, somewhere in Missouri. The exact location has been lost to time. The field has been plowed and replanted countless times. The prairie grass that witnessed the confrontation has been replaced by corn and soybeans and suburban developments. But if you know where to look, if you walk the old roads and study the old maps and listen to the stories that grandparents tell, you might find the spot where two horses stopped 10 feet apart. You might stand where Captain Whitmore stood when he made his offer of peace. You might feel the wind that carried his words across the empty field. And you might understand, finally, why the white flag meant nothing. Not because the rules were wrong, not because diplomacy was foolish, but because some wounds cannot be negotiated away, because some pain demands a price that no treaty can pay, because somewhere in Kansas City, a 14-year-old girl died screaming. And her brother heard those screams every day for the rest of his short, violent, tragic life. Bill Anderson met a Union commander under a white flag to talk peace. He rode back alone. The commander did not. And Missouri learned once again that in a war without rules, there is no such thing as peace. There is only the next killing, and the one after that, and the one after that, until finally, mercifully, someone puts a bullet in your head and the screaming stops. Was Bill Anderson a monster? Undoubtedly. The scalps and the mutilations and the murdered prisoners prove that beyond any doubt. But monsters are not born, they are made. And the men who made Bill Anderson. The officers who signed Order Number 11. The soldiers who arrested his sisters. The builders who constructed an unsafe building and the commanders who knew it would collapse. They bear their share of the blame too. History is not a story of heroes and villains. It is a story of consequences. And Bill Anderson was the consequence of Union brutality, just as surely as the dead at Centralia were consequences of Confederate brutality. The cycle fed itself. It fed on blood and tears and the endless desire for revenge that burns in every human heart. The white flag was supposed to break that cycle. Instead, it became another victim of it. Captain Whitmore believed in the white flag. Bill Anderson believed in the knife. The knife won. It usually does. What do you think about the white flag meeting? Was Bill Anderson a monster who violated every rule of warfare? Or was he the inevitable result of a war that had already abandoned its rules? The truth is complicated. The truth is always complicated. Comment below and tell me your thoughts. History is not just about facts. It is about understanding, and understanding requires discussion. Let me know what you think happened on that Missouri field, and what it means for how we remember the Civil War. But wait, there is one more detail about this story that I have not told you yet. One detail that changes everything you think you know about the white flag meeting. Remember when I told you that Bill Anderson rode out to the meeting alone? That was true. Cole Younger watched him go. Jesse James watched him go. All 30 of his guerrillas watched him ride toward the horizon, where Captain Whitmore waited with his white flag. But there was someone else watching too. Someone the guerrillas did not know about. Someone Captain Whitmore did not know about either. A Union scout named Private William Howard had been following Anderson men for 3 days. He had strict orders not to engage, not to reveal himself, just to observe and report. His commanders wanted to know where the guerrillas were camped, how many men they had, what their patterns were. Howard was hidden in a small grove of trees about 200 yards from the meeting point. He saw everything. He saw Captain Whitmore arrive with his white flag. He saw Bill Anderson approach on his black horse with the scalps braided into the saddle. He saw them face each other in that empty field. And he saw what happened when Bill pulled out the paper with the signatures. Howard had field glasses. military issue, captured from a Confederate officer months earlier. Through those glasses, he could see Captain Whitmore's face clearly. He could see the moment when the captain took the paper. He could see the blood drain from his face as he read whatever was written there. And he could see Bill Anderson's hand moving toward his revolver. Howard had a rifle. He had a clear shot. For one frozen moment, he had the chance to change history. He could have shot Bill Anderson right there in that field, before the guerrilla leader could draw his weapon. He could have saved Captain Whitmore's life. He could have ended the terror of Bloody Bill before Centralia, before the final charge, before the death and the desecration and the 3 days of public display. He did not take the shot, not because he was afraid, not because his orders were only to observe. He did not take the shot because he hesitated. Just for a second, just long enough for Bill to draw, just long enough for the gunshot to echo across the prairie, just long enough for Captain Whitmore to fall. Private Howard would carry that hesitation for the rest of his life. He never wrote about it. He never told anyone except his wife on his deathbed in 1892. She kept the secret for another 20 years before telling her own daughter. The story passed down through the family as a shameful secret. The moment when an ancestor could have killed Bloody Bill Anderson and chose not to. But here is what makes Private Howard's decision more complicated than simple cowardice. He hesitated because he saw the paper, through his field glasses. He saw Captain Whitmore read something that made him go pale. He saw the captain try to explain, try to defend himself, try to distance himself from whatever was written on that document. And Howard assumed. He assumed that Captain Whitmore was guilty of something. He assumed that Bill Anderson had evidence of some Union crime. He assumed that the guerrilla leader was administering a rough kind of justice, the only kind of justice that existed in Missouri in 1864. He was wrong, of course. The paper was fake. Captain Whitmore was innocent. But Howard did not know that. All he knew was that he had seen a Union officer confronted with evidence of wrongdoing. And he hesitated to save that officer because he was not sure the officer deserved saving. This is what the war in Missouri had done to its soldiers. It had made them doubt their own side. It had made them wonder whether their commanders were telling the truth. It had made them hesitate when they should have acted, because they were no longer certain who the real enemy was. Bill Anderson exploited that uncertainty masterfully. The fake paper was not just a tool for killing Captain Whitmore. It was a psychological weapon designed to make Union soldiers doubt each other. If Anderson had documents connecting their officers to atrocities, if he had proof of their commander's involvement in Order Number 11 and the deaths of women and children, then maybe, just maybe, the guerrillas were not the monsters. Maybe the Union was. This doubt spread through the ranks like a disease after the white flag meeting. Soldiers who had been certain of their cause began to question. Officers who had been confident of their righteousness began to wonder. And the war became even more brutal because of it. When soldiers stopped believing in the justice of their cause, they stopped following the rules of war. They start taking shortcuts. They start committing atrocities of their own. They become the very thing they were fighting against. Bill Anderson knew this. He understood, perhaps better than any general on either side, the psychological dimension of warfare. He knew that killing bodies was not enough. You had to kill beliefs. You had to destroy the enemy conviction that they were right. The fake paper was a masterpiece of psychological warfare. It did not matter that it was a lie. What mattered was that it planted doubt. And doubt, in a war like Missouri, was deadlier than any bullet. Private Howard lived until 1892. He never served in combat again after that September afternoon. He requested a transfer to supply duty and spent the rest of the war counting bullets and blankets in a warehouse in St. Louis. His commanders were puzzled by the request, but granted it. He told no one about the white flag meeting. He told no one about the shot he did not take. He told no one about the doubt that had frozen his trigger finger. But the doubt stayed with him. Every time he read about a bushwhacker atrocity in the newspapers, he wondered if he could have prevented it. Every time he heard about soldiers killed by guerrillas, he wondered if those soldiers would have lived if he had just pulled the trigger. Every time he heard the name Bloody Bill Anderson, he remembered the field glasses and the clear shot, and the moment when he chose not to act. On his deathbed, surrounded by his children and grandchildren, he finally confessed. He told his wife about the white flag meeting. He told her about the shot he did not take. And he told her about the doubt that had haunted him for nearly 30 years. She listened without judgment. When he finished, she took his hand and said something that he would carry with him into eternity. You could not have known the paper was fake. You could not have known the captain was innocent. You did what anyone would have done in that moment. You hesitated because you were human. Do not blame yourself for being human. Howard died later that night. His last words were inaudible. A mumble that might have been a prayer, or might have been an apology, or might have been a woman name. His wife never told anyone what those last words were. Some secrets are too heavy to share. The story of Private Howard was discovered by a historian in 1987, buried in a box of family papers donated to the Missouri Historical Society. The historian, Dr. James Mitchell, spent 2 years verifying the account. He tracked down Howard military records. He found corroborating evidence of the scout assignment. He even located the field glasses, still in the possession of a distant relative. The discovery changed how historians understood the white flag meeting. Previously, they had assumed Bill Anderson simply murdered Captain Whitmore without warning. They had assumed it was a cold-blooded assassination disguised as a peace negotiation. Howard's account revealed something more complex. It revealed that there was a conversation. It revealed that Bill showed the captain something. It revealed that there was a moment, however brief, when the outcome might have been different. Dr. Mitchell published his findings in a 1991 book titled The Witness at the White Flag. It received mixed reviews. Some historians praised it as a groundbreaking addition to Civil War scholarship. Others dismissed it as speculation based on unreliable family legend. But the most interesting response came from a descendant of Captain James Whitmore. His great-great-grandson, Thomas Whitmore IV, read Dr. Mitchell's book and felt compelled to respond. He wrote a long letter to the author, describing his family reaction to the discovery. For over a century, he wrote, "My family believed that Captain Whitmore was an innocent victim, that he was murdered simply for being in the wrong place at the wrong time, that Bill Anderson was a monster who killed without reason or provocation." The letter continued, "Dr. Mitchell's book does not change the tragedy. Captain Whitmore was still innocent. The paper Bill showed him was still a lie. But knowing that there was a moment of confrontation, knowing that Bill believed, however wrongly, that he was avenging his sister, knowing that there was someone watching who might have changed everything." Thomas Whitmore IV concluded, "It makes the story more human, not less tragic, but more human, and perhaps that is worth knowing." Dr. Mitchell framed the letter and hung it in his office. He died in 2008 without ever finding additional evidence about the white flag meeting. But the story continues to fascinate historians because it represents something universal about war and violence and the terrible choices that ordinary people are forced to make in extraordinary circumstances. Captain Whitmore made a choice to negotiate. Bill Anderson made a choice to kill. Private Howard made a choice not to shoot. 3 choices, 3 men, 1 outcome, and 150 years of wondering what might have happened if any of them had chosen differently. The field where they met has changed beyond recognition. The prairie has been plowed under. The trees where Howard hid are long gone. The Missouri sun still sets in the same direction, but everything else is different. If you drive through that part of Missouri today, you will see farms and small towns and highways carrying traffic between Kansas City and St. Louis. You will see gas stations and fast food restaurants and all the ordinary features of American life. You will not see the ghosts, but they are there. Captain Whitmore still trying to explain that he had nothing to do with Order Number 11. Bill Anderson still listening with those empty eyes. Private Howard still watching through his field glasses with his finger on the trigger. They are frozen in that September afternoon, forever replaying the moment when everything might have changed. The white flag still flutters in the wind. Say it still means nothing, and somewhere in the fields beyond the highway noise you can almost hear the echo of a single gunshot. The shot that ended one man's life, and the shot that was never fired. The shot that might have saved him. Both shots matter. Both shots tell us something about what war does to people. Both shots remind us that history is not inevitable, that choices matter, that the outcome we know is not the only outcome that could have been. Captain James Whitmore did not have to die on that September afternoon, but he did. because a paper was faked, because a trigger was pulled, because a scout hesitated, because a war had destroyed every rule that might have protected him. The white flag meeting was not unique. It was simply the most dramatic example of a pattern that repeated throughout the Missouri conflict. Truces were offered and broken. Peace was promised and betrayed. Men met under flags of surrender, and only some of them walked away. This is what happens when war becomes personal. This is what happens when every soldier has lost someone to the enemy. This is what happens when revenge matters more than victory. Captain Whitmore wanted peace. Bill Anderson wanted blood. Blood won. It usually does. But remember Private Howard. Remember the man who watched it all through his field glasses and chose not to act. Remember that there was a moment when history could have turned. And remember that he spent the rest of his life wondering what would have happened if he had taken the shot. The white flag meeting asks us questions that have no comfortable answers. Was Bill Anderson a monster? Yes. The evidence is overwhelming. Was he responsible for his monstrosity? The answer is more complicated. Would killing him earlier have prevented the atrocities that followed? We cannot know. Would it have changed anything fundamental about the war in Missouri? Probably not. If not Bill Anderson, then someone else would have risen to lead the guerrillas. The conditions that created him would have created another, but those individual lives. Captain Whitmore, who had a wife and children waiting for him, the Union soldiers who died at Centralia, the prisoners who were executed with 10 seconds to pray. Those individual lives might have been saved, and that has to matter, even if the war would have continued, even if another monster would have risen. The individuals who died because of Bill Anderson were real people. They had families, they had futures, they had the right to live. Bill Anderson took that right away. And every person who could have stopped him and did not. Every officer who did not take the threat seriously. Every soldier who hesitated, like Private Howard. They bear some responsibility too, not as much as Bill, but some. The white flag meeting is a story about consequences. The consequence of killing a guerrilla sister, the consequence of breaking the rules of war, the consequence of hesitating when action was needed. Every war is a web of consequences, each action triggering reactions, each death demanding vengeance, each atrocity justifying further atrocity. Missouri in 1864 was that web at its most tangled, and Bill Anderson was the spider at its center. He did not weave the web, but he knew how to use it. He knew that every Union soldier who killed a civilian would create 3 more guerrillas. He knew that every broken truce would make future truces worthless. He knew that every escalation would be matched and exceeded, and he used that knowledge. He became the embodiment of the cycle, the perfect predator in a war that had stopped distinguishing between predator and prey. When he met Captain Whitmore under the white flag, he was not trying to end the cycle. He was trying to accelerate it. He wanted the Union to respond with more brutality. He wanted more farms burned, more women arrested, more civilians caught in the crossfire. He wanted the war to become so terrible that no one could remain neutral. He wanted everyone in Missouri to choose a side, and then to suffer for that choice. And in this terrible goal he succeeded completely. The death of Captain Whitmore under a flag of truce provoked exactly the response Bill wanted. The Union abandoned all pretense of civilized warfare. They hunted guerrillas without mercy. They executed prisoners without trial. They became indistinguishable from the enemies they were fighting. And the people of Missouri suffered. They had already suffered. They would continue to suffer for years after the war officially ended, because wars like the one in Missouri do not end with treaties and surrenders. They end only when the last person who remembers gives up the fight. Some historians estimate that the guerrilla conflict in Missouri continued for a full decade after Appomattox. The killing slowed but never stopped. The revenge continued, generation after generation, until finally the memories faded and the descendants forgot why they were supposed to hate each other. Bill Anderson did not live to see that long peace. He died at 24, shot down in a Missouri field, his body displayed and desecrated by the people he had terrorized, but his legacy lived on. In Jesse James, robbing banks and trains for 15 years, in the outlaw culture that romanticized violence and revenge, in the stories told around campfires about the man who charged 150 soldiers with only 30 men. And in the white flag that still means nothing in certain parts of the world, places where the rules of war have broken down, places where peace is impossible because too much blood has been spilled, places where every truce is just another opportunity for ambush. Those places exist today. They will exist tomorrow. They are the legacy of men like Bill Anderson, and the failures of men like Captain Whitmore, and the hesitations of men like Private Howard. The white flag still flies, and sometimes it still means nothing. Bill met a Union commander under that flag to talk peace. He rode back alone. The commander did not. And Missouri learned once again that some wounds cannot be healed with words. Some wounds demand blood, and blood, once demanded, is rarely satisfied until everyone who could have stopped the bleeding is dead.